The word sake in Japan means alcohol. So you sit at a bar, you ask the bartender for sake, they're gonna scratch their head and say, what do you want? Whiskey, beer, what is it? The actual word for sake in Japan is nihonshu, which translates to Japanese alcohol. Hi, guys. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. It's quite a treat to have you guys here. I hope everybody has a glass and some sake. First of all, I'd like to do a quick toast to Sake Day, which is just around the corner, and everything about sake. So cheers, guys. Cheers to you. Enjoy. So we're here to cover pretty much everything about sake. I'll have a seat for a second here, since it's here. So we'll start a little bit with my own experience. I'll cover some ground, and then we go into details and whatnot. In my own experience, it was pretty much written in the stars. I was born and raised in Mexico. Ended up in Napa, California. So you would say naturally attracted to sake, but quite the opposite. So certainly there was a path for me where I grew up. There was a lot of beverage-driven stuff. The oldest winery in the Americas sits right outside my hometown. So definitely some sort of alcohol always drew me there. When I was like 10 or 11 years old, I was my uncle's favorite bartender at family gatherings. He really leaned on me for the perfect Cuba Libre. And he insisted, he's like, bring it when it's perfect. So dip your finger in it until my mom caught us, and that was not fun. But anyway, always had a little bit of a beverage part into me. Obviously, wine in some ways and some other beverages. Ended up moving to Napa 20 years ago this year. And that's where I've made my home for since then. And I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I miss it when I travel as much as I love Japan. And I can't wait to move there. Napa for now, it's an amazing spot to live. I started kind of getting into the wine side, more serious, even though my first real goal was to be a psychiatrist. So when I moved to Napa, I started going through school, getting some prereqs during JC and whatnot, and going for psychology and all that stuff. But I started working in restaurants, and something that inevitably just pulled me back into that scene. And at some point, I scratched my head and I thought, you know, it'd be amazing to be a psychiatrist and blah, 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 blah. But at this point, the hospitality industry has treated me really well. So I decided to opt for that side. I worked at some amazing spots in Napa where I had great mentors, mostly on the wine side. There was like, where do we start? Like Bistro Don Giovanni, Michael Gallion, Trevina. That kind of pulled me really deep into the hospitality. I always really enjoyed having people celebrating things and coming in and seeing them at their best, as opposed to a psychiatrist, which an amazing thing. I don't know, maybe one day I'll end up doing that when I'm 70, I don't know. And I would love to, if possible. But it is quite a different realm. So you're seeing people really happy, celebrating things, enjoying. It's a pretty fun aspect to it. So after being in many restaurants throughout Napa, I was sort of parallel, I fell in love with sake. And this happened probably about 15 years ago. Out of anywhere, a little mom and pop's place called Sushi Mambo downtown Napa that lived there for years. And I go there, and we started going sort of regularly, weekly, bi-weekly with friends, and just enjoying sake. And back then, as actually a little side thing, like sake started in the US as struggling, try to get in and break through, and people are trying to figure out, it's like, how is sake gonna fit into the market? But they really were depending on export to keep alive the sake industry, which we'll cover a little further. But so it started as hot sake, which is your base level sake. And I don't wanna say it's the cheap stuff, but in a lot of times it is. It's like rougher around the edges. It's an amazing experience to have hot sake. And these days you can have some really killer, amazing sakes, as we'll taste later, that can be great with different temperatures. But anyway, back then, the celebration was 3 or 4 or 6 friends, and we would sit down and drink hot sake and eat sushi. And that was like our weekly, bi-weekly, monthly thing. And it's amazing. And one day, I really just put a little thought into it. And I thought, wow, it's like there's people that drink tequila and they say Jose comes out and everybody gets angry and it's like you can't drink tequila, you're banned from tequila. People know that. Other people with gin, it's like, oh, no. Gin doesn't work for me. I'm another person. But with sake, it was always since then a fantastic, pretty warm, heartwarming experience. And you start thinking, so I started kind of getting very curious back then. And even though it was just like a playful, fun thing, I started just researching. This is 15 years ago. There was not a lot of stuff. And still to this day, sake, it's not at the level that wine is. Like for wine, we have an amazing wealth of information. We have documentaries, we have books on end, we have, walking encyclopedias like Larry Stone, people like that, Master SOMMs, people that you can talk to, relate to, and go a little more in depth in wine, right? You can visit a lot of wine regions and see how they do it differently, soils, terroir, how wine is made. But with sake, even back then, even now, it's just sort of like an unknown, very mysticism around it. And that's what we're trying to break. So I started studying it, and very casually. This was nothing that I thought, oh, I'm gonna really study it. And I think that's what really hooked me into it. It was pleasurable. It was something like, oh my God, I wanna find out more. So one time, maybe a year or two after that, as we started going to drink hot sake, there's a place that opens up in Santa Elena. It's called Go Fish. And it's Chef Ken Tominawa, who's now super famous with Pabu, Michael Mina, Hana restaurant, for people that are somewhat local or traveling would know. And he partnered with Cindy Paulson, one of the institutions in Napa Valley. And they hired this one guy who's now become a true mentor and a very, very good friend of mine. A guy that was born and raised in America, and he was a chef trained, and then he ended up in Japan taking an exam for master. So he's a master of sake, Stuart Morris. So he was running the beverage at this restaurant, and I go on a date, and we sit in there, and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to just be like super excited about sake, and I heard they had all this sake list. So we drive in there, sit down, and I asked for this sake flight, 3 different sakes. And I'm super excited, and then Stuart comes, first time I meet him, he sets 3 sakes, and they're cold, and they're filtered, and he sets them in the middle, and I could tell you right now, I couldn't tell you what he said. It just sounded like blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, and it happens often. Like you could say, Gohyaku Mangoku Junmai Daigincho, and you're like, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't resonate, right? But at the same time, I'm looking at this and smelling it coming out of the glass, and it was like TV just turned on in color. It was like, bam. It was like first time you're seeing all these crazy things. I don't know, I kind of, it's similar to maybe somebody that's done acid for the first time, I guess. It's just like, bam, colors and things are jumping out of the glass. What's going on? Hold me. So we have this experience. We start tasting the sakes, and it just became hooked. I started talking to Stuart, started making friends with them, started trying to find out more. It's like, what is this thing's going out of these glasses? How is one thing made of rice creating so many levels and styles, and it's not hot? It's like, come on, what's going on? So I started studying it, still casually, nothing that I ever expected to make to be serious about, or this serious, like something more personal. So fast forward a few years, I still work in Napa Valley in the restaurant world, mostly Italian driven, which I love Italian wines, cuisine, everything about it. And back to one of my mentors, Michael Gallion, who I had worked with at Don Giovanni, he calls me over. We opened another Italian restaurant in Yountville, pulls me out of Trevina. Amazing guy. He saw something in me, he pulls me there. And then one day, while we're working there, he gets a call from Chef Morimoto. And this was a long circle, how it came back to him, but he used to work with Michael Chiarello, and Michael Chiarello talked to Chef Morimoto, and they said, hey, you should hire Michael Gallion as your opening GM of Napa Valley. And Michael, as soon as he gets the call, he says, Eduardo, you're coming with me, you got the wine down, you're gonna be the beverage director at the restaurant. And I said, sure, bring it. I love this. I mean, I'm definitely gonna take it up a notch. And I take the position. We opened in 2010 Morimoto Napa, which is Chef Morimoto's first own restaurant. This is like his own baby. He had opened restaurants in Philadelphia, New York, but we're part of a group. and now he's on his own. So it's a lot of stake. You can't really mess this one up. This is Chef's own money and everything. So we opened the restaurant. The first 2 weeks of training, it was like the most eye-opening. Talk about going down the rabbit hole. We had 2 amazing friends and also mentors, Eric and Yuno, who had an opening list of sake that was about 50 plus selections of sake. And imagine going from like 1 or 2 to 3 sakes that you knew, that you kind of seeked and looked regularly, to having a 50 plus list. That's yours. This is for yours to keep and curate and relay it to other people. And not only that, but we tasted every single sake with component tastings. So we had, you call it, you name it, Cheetos with Yamaha sake, and with celery with the daiginjo, and all these things that we were tasting together in little cups, and it was like, what's going on here? It's like every single prefecture, I mean, we had all the information about it. So I really just adhered to that. There was no turning back by then. I was just completely hooked in the culture and everything about it. And I started just studying more. From then, I started getting certified. And we go and take John Gardner's course. And this is, back then, it was like the first thing that resonated as far as how do we learn more and get certified and learn more. So John Gardner is this guy that was born in the US, and he decided when he graduated from university to go to Japan and become a teacher. He said, okay, I'm gonna go to Japan for a year. I've never traveled, I'm gonna learn something. So he decides to go be a teacher. But when he's there, he gets hooked with sake. So he starts trying to find out about how this beverage is made and stuff, sort of like a parallel universe. And after much knocking doors, he finally gets let into a couple breweries, and he starts documenting all this stuff. He becomes fascinated, and he decides to come back to the US years later and start like passing it on to people. So back to my experience. So we go through the John Gardner course, which is a pretty intricate. These days, there's like Sake School of America, there's WSC3, there's the Court of Masters has a part on sake and all that. So we get certified, and then at the same time, probably about a year later, and I'm so into still with wine, it's like in my veins, and sake, and I get invited to start judging. So judging, it's another world. So judging, you get, I started judging wine, and sake was part of one of the components there. And imagine sitting there and getting 13 different Cabernet Sauvignons from California, or like, I don't know, 14 Asserticos from Greece, and all these wines in front of you. And I was a little intimidated. Luckily, the first person that guided me through, and I was in my panel, was Heidi Barrett. So she's sitting right next to me, and very motherly. She kind of guided me through the steps. Fred Dame was there to make fun and kind of teach us some things. And this was like the first time I'm judging, so I was super excited, learned a lot of things. We judged sake, which was part of my realm. I was more comfortable. And it was super exciting to do that. So I got invited back to judging for that. That was the San Francisco International Competition, which later turned into also the Spirits Competition, which included other things. And then I get invited to judge in Tokyo. One of the judges who was judging with us in San Francisco, he was the founder of this competition, the Japan Wine Challenge and Japan Sake International Challenge. And he had started this competition 20-some years ago with Steven Spurrier in Tokyo proper. And the guy says, wow, I see you really enjoy sake, and you're talking about sake, and so why don't you come with us to Tokyo? And I just said yes. And of course, as a kid, it's like, I don't know, following your favorite sports team, right? I don't know, the Chicago Bulls, and never been to Chicago. It was like, oh, no, you have to go to Chicago. You go see the game, right? You got to see Michael Jordan play back in those days. So same thing for me with sake and going to Japan. It was always part of my imprint. It was like in my blood now. I've been studying it, tradition, sake, food, all these things, but I'd never been to Japan, and I needed a venue to get there, right? I was so busy. By then, I became the corporate beverage director for the Morimoto Restaurant Group, and I started growing the program. We started opening, where did we open? Mexico City, And I was there for about a month, training, opening, putting all the programs together, and blah, blah, blah. Chicago, Maui, South Beach, Florida, all these places. So I was so busy, but I needed to find my way to Japan. So when this guy offers me an invitation to go judge, I said, there's no better excuse. I got to do this. So talked it through and thought about it, and we finally, I just said, yes, I'm going. And this is probably 2-3 weeks before the competition. So he sends me he verbally invites me, I think it was like March, and the competition was in July. And I had it in my head, but so busy with everything, and all of a sudden it's like 3 weeks before the competition, and I said, what am I thinking? I gotta do this. There's no other way. I gotta get to Japan and do this. So I buy my ticket last minute, and I go on this adventure. And by now it's, I don't know, 2013, 14. And just imagine this kid that's gonna go see like his heroes, right? In a way, it's like very exciting. So I buy my ticket and I fly straight to Japan. First thing I do before I go, I mean, probably with 4 days to go, I start emailing everybody. It's like, hey, who can I go visit? So I reach out to my top breweries that I've been in love with, people that I've met or whatnot, and other friends. So I lock in this one brewery, Shishima Brewery in Niigata in Shibata City. And imagine me at like, with no idea what to do. I land in Haneda Airport, which to me, when I landed after a, 11 and change flight, was like landing like Total Recall. Remember that movie? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like everything's like super futuristic, and that's how I was seeing it. It was so weird. There's machines for everything, and I was like so confused. What's going on? How am I gonna get to here to there? And like my friend Kenji from Ishishima had told me, he's like, yeah, just get this train at this time from here to here. And I didn't understand how everything was so perfectly in time. Like in Japan, it's like clockwork. It's like if the train says 8:03, it's 8:03. Otherwise, it leaves you. So I figure out these things, and I land about 7 in the morning, first time ever in Japan, and I'm about to board the Shinkansen, the bullet train, to Niigata. So I started seeing all these people, I believe it was a Saturday, and I started seeing all this like businessman and people stopping at the little vending machines and buying a beer, an Asahi, and some sushi and some random stuff. So I do the same. It's like monkey see, monkey do. So I'm like, cool, this is what's to do. So I go and I grab a little Asahi and I grab some random boxes of food that I've never seen before. I was like, oh, let's see what it is. And I just get on the train and I head to Niigata. So I head there, and this is August, late July, August, and it's like hot. It's like, if you've ever been to like as close to heaven as you've been, it's like super hot. It's like 100 degrees, full humidity. Get to Niigata City, and Kenji had helped me because I had no idea about anything. So he had helped me kind of connect with a little hotel in Niigata City, which is a small city. You're talking about maybe 500,000 people, in relation small. So I land there, and I get to that hotel, and I ask at the desk, and I said, oh, I'm here. It's like, by now it's like 11, because the Shinkansen is like a 2-hour ride. I had a great time. I had my Asahi, and I enjoyed the views and everything. And I still have a jacket. I think it was this one or one of these jackets. Anyway, so I get there, and it's so hot, and I'm so excited, and I try to check in at the hotel, and they say, well, your room's not going to be ready until like 5 p.m. or whatever time it was. And I said, no problem. I'm going to leave my bags, and I'm going to go for a walk. I'm like, this couldn't be better. Like, I'm in the place I want to be. So I literally just drop my bags, and I walk out, and I just I like look at my map, and I was like, where's the ocean? I'll just walk that way. So it was like probably like 30 blocks away. And I just started walking, and I just walked into random places, and I saw a little tiny sake shop and blah, blah, blah. And with my very lack of Japanese and their lack of English, but it was such a welcoming part of the world. That was my first time. I didn't spend any time in Tokyo other than the train station, and just seeing people like stop, like elder people, and bow, and when they see you come in, and it's like, I didn't fit in that place, and I was like, but I felt welcome. I felt like it was like home. So that was one of the other indications. So I finally make it to the ocean, come back, and I'm kind of hungry. And this is one of the funniest stories that happens to me still to this day. I end up in a place, I'm like, I'm just hungry. I need to eat. I still have 2 hours to get to that room. So I walk into a random place, and I just grab a menu, and I mean, I don't think there was like Google Translate back then, but I grab a menu and I just played Russian roulette, and I picked one thing, and I said, that's it. And the server is like, really? And I said, yeah, that one, yes. And there was like a couple families eating, and I sit at the bar, and I also look at the sake list, and I say, I'll take a glass of that. So all of a sudden, I started back there, I could see through the kitchen, and they're like making all these noodles. And I had ordered like noodles for like a family of 4 or 6. There was noodles, there was some vegetable tempura, and there's dipping sauces, and the whole people in the restaurant stopped, and they're like, that guy's hungry. And I remember I didn't want to look too odd, so I grabbed the newspaper, and I started kind of pretending I was reading it. And I was like, started eating. I was like, well, I ate it, and my mom trained me not to ever waste food, so I'm just gonna go to town here. I have nowhere to go, and I just start eating little by little. People are really staring at me. It's like, wow, that guy is hungry. Where has he been? So anyway, I still to this day, I don't know how much I paid or anything. I just gave him my car. That's it. Find my hotel and stuff, and then I ended up in Niigata City, and I went to see this guy, Kenji, that I met him in Napa once before, and he was a little flashy, like crazy shirts. Cool dude, and I didn't imagine not knowing what to expect about a sake brewery, especially this brewery. I wish I had a bottle here. It's very futuristic. They're not exporting right now for the moment, but very futuristic, white bottle with an orange label, really beautiful. So I thought this guy is gonna pick me up in a crazy Lamborghini, and it's gonna be weird. And so I show up, I miss the train because literally you show up to the train station and you click on the train opens the door, and I didn't know that you had to push a button for it to keep it open. So I get there right in time, and it says like 3:05, whatever it was, the next day, and I get there at 3:03, and the doors closed of the train, and I had to go 2 stations over, and it just doesn't open and leaves. Later I realized, because I called Kenji right away, I was like, it left me. I was on time. It left me. And realized later that you have to push a button when it's in summer so it doesn't lose the AC inside. Lesson learned. So anyway, I finally make it to the next station. He picks me up, and it was super modest, and it was like, it was not a Lamborghini, it was a regular car, and the guy was super down to earth, and we started going through the fields and get into the brewery. This brewery started brewing in 1791, which is like back in the day. And really beautiful. Like you needed 2 people to open the front door to kind of get through. Very antique. They had a little museum of sake brewing. So that was my first experience. We tasted the food. He did like a tea ceremony. I don't know if you guys ever seen one of those with like the pottery, and you have to turn the green tea. And it was just magical. We're sitting in this garden, and I was just in awe. So we finished the visit. I go back to Niigata City, and then I go back to Tokyo, and then the judging begins. And the first day was the sake judging, and then I get to judge alongside this like old people that have been judging for the national appraisal, the government, all this for sake, and it was pretty amazing. And I just wanted to pinch myself the whole time. So anyway, I come back to Napa, and I was like super pumped. I was like, wow, I can't wait to get back there, share the experience. I kind of documented some things, and fast forward, I keep working for Morimoto, and just kind of sharing the experience. Fall in love more and more with Japan, with everything, with shochu, with awamori, which is spirits made in the south of Japan, Japanese whiskey, and I still keep coming back to Japan. At this point, it was like 2-3 times a year. By now, it's like 4 times a year minimum. I try to be there, and just start visiting and checking it out and seeing everything. And at some point in 2017, it just didn't work out anymore. And my passion for Japan was so much, and like it was like bursting out of my chest, if you will. And although everything I was learning and tasting and everything I was relaying to the staff, for Chef Morimoto, it really didn't work out anymore. He's like, yes, I love you, you're doing an amazing job, but I need you to stay in the restaurant. He's like, you can't keep going back to Japan all the time. And there was a point where I just had to say, thank you so much for everything. I'm still to this day beyond grateful to Chef. He gave me a lot of things in this industry and everything, but I had to like part ways. So I really jump off a cliff with a lot of help, and I jump and I start just trying to figure out what to do. But all I know is sake is like really deep, and I gotta just make sure that sake gets carried through shochu, all these things that it's amazing. So a lot of very serendipitous things. I started like working or pouring for sake events or other kind of events like film festivals. The Queen of the Valley, which is a big hospital in Napa, doing like what do you call it, a benefit kind of events and donating experiences with sake. And at this point, I had a lot of support, and it didn't have to create any revenue. It was actually a very lucky time where I could just focus on getting people excited about sake and not making it like, oh, I gotta make money because I gotta support a family and all these things. So it was very nice transition where it allowed me to all these things at the same time. Curiously and sadly enough, in Napa, we had the fires that went through, and there was a lot of things. So kind of sake opened the door where I had all this access to sake and some vendors and people that I'd loved for years, and they donated stuff, and I was like able to do a couple events. Like something as simple as when in Napa, we were in the middle of the fires, it was a scary time. We were able to connect with a couple food vendors and make these dinners and just bring sake, people brought wine, and cook, and just be like a little period where there was some normalcy and people could talk to each other. And like, what's going on? We've been secluded because of the fire. So if you could imagine those things. So sake definitely started opening a lot of those doors. And at the same time, I started writing for a few publications, a lot of wine stuff, a lot of sake stuff and spirits. And I continued judging every year like clockwork. So the main three competitions was the San Francisco wine and sake, the San Francisco spirits, and then the Japan wine and sake/sake. And then started kind of adding some other competitions to the portfolio, which was, to me, was the coolest thing, because you could go and share ideas and learn. I mean, the most important thing is to learn. So I start visiting more breweries and being more detail-oriented as far as like, what can I learn? Because in this realm of beverage, just like wine, like spirits, like sake, there's never an ending point. You just keep going and going. So I go and visit a few brewers, including this one that you're tasting right now that you started with. This is Takeda-san. Takeda-san's brewery started in the 1860s. He's a 9th generation. His son is about to take over as a 10th generation, and they're in this little part of Niigata, and it was quite magical. I mean, if you could imagine when we parked there, we literally get driven by a really good friend of mine who's an artist and an exporter and stuff, and he says, no, you gotta see this guy. And I've known of Takeda-san sake, and I've met him in Napa, because he came a couple times to Morimoto when I was running the program. We did a couple tastings and whatnot, and always supported his stuff. So I finally go to see him, made an excuse to go to Niigata, to his part of the world, and we go see the brewery. We park, and it's like a little house. There's like barely a sign, and I told Kazu, our friend, I said, there's no way this is the brewery. And he says, no, this is it. So we walk into the brewery. Imagine a little square, I mean, like, I don't know, what is it, 7 by 7? That was their tasting room. It was like right in the front of the brewery, a couple glasses, and then you're tasting the sakes with his son and his son's daughter, like running around. And it was very homey. And it was like, wow, this is really true. They make something like, at the end of the day, like 400 koku, which is like, I don't know, 4,000 bottles, like the large bottles. Super tiny production in a way. The fanciest thing they had in the brewery was the truck they used to transport the sake. I kid you not. It was like, oh, wow, there's something new. Everything else was super tiny. We literally walked through his house to get to the brewery in the part of the back of the house. And they had the tanks. I got to see a couple of his secrets, which he doesn't usually share. He's a quiet guy. But one of them is actually in reference to this bottle. This is a replica of a Tobin. A Tobin is a 18-liter glass container, or demijohn or bonbons if you were related to wine. And it's basically a glass container where sake sits there in a temporary time, whether according to each producer, it's a long or short period of time. But his trick under the sleeve is leaving the sake in a container like this, 18-liter, at a low temperature. You're talking about 3 to 6 months, maybe 9, and there's no like exact formula. And this is what I found out only being there, because he would never share this. And he just keeps tasting the sake until it kind of collects itself And I don't know if you guys taste this, but to me, this is like that Instagram filter that's really bright. It like, bam, it pops out. And that's something he achieves with this extra aging period at a low temperature. Because if you put it at a hot temperature, you're gonna really evolve and oxidate the style. But in this one, it really jumps out of the glass. I mean, you get an experience from like orange peel, like dried orange peel, to anise, to citrus, to chalky minerality. I mean, it's a whole experience. And you get a bit of sweetness in the mid palate, but then it resolves in the acid just popping through, which is one of his favorite techniques. So we go see him. There's like, you walk through the place, there's like this 2 old ladies putting labels. Everything's done by hand. It's like super magic. He's won a few awards. And beyond that, I've been a fan of his style forever. So a beautiful sake that relates to the style. This is a Honjoso style, so it's a Daiginjo. Daiginjo, and I'll do a quick chart if you're a visual person, like a triangle, right? So you have a triangle, you cut it in half. Half of this is gonna be a junmai, which means pure rice. 4 ingredients in the sake only, and I'll run through them. We can go through them again in the question. Rice, water, koji, and yeast. So the 4 ingredients on this half of the triangle. The other half has a 5th ingredient, just like the Beatles had like Billy Preston on the keys every once in a while. If there's any older people that would get that reference from one of the greatest bands in the world. So the Billy Preston sitting on this side of the triangle, the Billy Preston in this case is alcohol, brewer's alcohol. So brewer's alcohol gets added to the actual sake that's finished. And a quick story about it, during the Second World War, or prior to the Second World War, it was only the 4 ingredients, right? Only the 4 beetles there. But then, when the war comes, the government realizes, wow, we're at a shortage. We gotta feed civilians and troops, and we still gotta drink, even more than ever, because we have a war on our shoulders. But they go and sit all the brewers, and they say, let's brainstorm, scratch our heads until we figure out a way to do this. But we got to decrease the rice usage you're doing so we can feed the people. And they figure out this way. Honjoso, so you make a regular batch of sake. Let's call it like this much, right? Where your 4 ingredients. And then you stop the fermentation stops normally. You're not using the alcohol to arrest fermentation as you would with Madeira or port or sherry or something like that. So you add a little bit of the alcohol, and then you add water. So by doing that, you're increasing the yields. The alcohol percentage is pretty much at the base level of, let's call it 16% on average. So not rocket fuel, like some people think is like, oh, there's brewer's alcohol added. I'm not partying tonight. I'm just sipping. So not in this case. The actual final alcohol, it's about the same. And then it creates a beautiful, focused, sharp, uplifter aromatic style. I don't know if you guys get this now, but you will taste the difference with the next one. And it's like really just beautifully bright style. So once the ban is lifted, then you start seeing both styles again. The government says, since you were so generous changing your style, now you can do both. And some breweries focus on one, some on another, and a lot of them do both. So really beautiful thing. The alcohol that's added, there's no designation of it. It could be wheat, it could be sugarcane, which is the most popular. And in some crazy examples, there's actually sake that's been redistilled and added to the sake. So it creates a mind-blowing style. So anyway, the first one we tried is a Daiginjo, pure Daiginjo from Niigata. The second one you're gonna have right now, it is actually a Junmai Ginjo from Yamagata. So this is a more recent trip, even though I've been going over and over. Every time I try to have a little side thing, when I go to Tokyo to judge or I go for any reason, I try to always make time a day or two to just go get lost somewhere. So in one of the last trips, which was last March, I went with a couple friends that had never been to Japan. Both friends from Mexico. One of them I grew up with since I was little, and the other one I met recently, like 5 years ago. Great friend now. So we go to Niigata. And then from there, one of our friends, Jorge, had known somebody that lives in Yamagata. And Yamagata is up in the mountains. a beautiful region. I've always wanted to go, and this was the perfect excuse to go. So after Niigata, we jump on a bus. We thought, as I told my friends, and they hate me for this, I'm like, no, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the way there. They're like, oh yeah, sure. So we get there, and we're there at this time. And I said, we'll just find the next train. And then a friend from Niigata says, no, there's no trains to Yamagata. You can't get there by train. You have to rent a car. And then somebody else says, no, you can't rent a car if you're not Japanese, or you have to, the way to get there. Anyway, last minute, we ended up finding a bus. And my friends figured it out, and they hated me for it. They're like, you said you got it. I was like, well, we're here. So we take a bus, and it's a huge climb up to the mountains in Yamagata. And it was the most amazing time. The guy that was hosting us, friends of Jorge, he ended up saying, oh, do you guys want to see a sake brewery? And I said, sure. I was like, sign us up. He says, okay, tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., and this was after like 3 dinners we had with them. 7 in the morning, we're going to pick you up and take you to Dewa Zakura. That's a brewery I've always wanted to go. Huge fan, and that's the second one you have in there. He brings Akari-san. Akari-san is the daughter of the president and very soon to take over. And this lady is like fierce. She is not much taller than this, and she's just amazing. She's a sake samurai, and she's really promoting sake throughout the world. And she is so strong and amazingly. So she gives us a tour of the brewery. She allows us in places that we weren't supposed to be, because in my experience with breweries, usually if it's a brewing time, you can't get in certain rooms. It's very respected. And she said, no, you guys can go in there. It's fine. Just stay on this side and don't judge anything, things like that. But it was an amazing behind the scenes at this facility, of an iconic facility out in Tendo City, which is a very small city in Yamagata. So I decided to bring this one because it really showcases what Junmai Ginja should be, just like focused, sharp, green apples, mineral, Yamagata style, and the rice that's used is Dewa Sansan, which is Yamagata's like own flagship style. Just like Niigata has Gohyaku Mangoku or Koshitanrei, and Hyogo will have Yamada Nishiki. Different rice strains kind of take the flag from the place, which is something I love about Japan. You can go with a friend from Japan or somebody that's really into the culture and have ramen and go anywhere. Just pick a random ramen spot, and they'll be eating with them, and they can say, this is Akita ramen. And I was like, wait, nowhere in the menu says it's Akita ramen. How do you know this? Like, oh, because the noodle shape, it's like this, and it's hollow, or whatever it is. Or like, oh, this is Kyushu ramen, or because they use like fish in the broth. It's crazy. So same thing with sake. It's so, there's a clear stamp. And obviously there's some producers that kind of go out of the mold, like with sake does, right? There's somebody experimenting, and it's amazing and appreciated. But traditionally, regionality takes a huge stamp, and that's like the terroir, the stamp of each region. Like Akita sake will always have the Akita sake komachi rice as a flagship, and so on and so forth. So this is a true Yamagata producer. Oh, magic. Cheers. I was mouth-watering about this one. So the experience kind of takes me into other realms, getting back to my personal experience. Between writing, doing a number of events, and education, I started working with JETRO, with the Japanese government, and a number of friends that have been really mentors. And I started like learning from all these people. I'm getting excited about making it a point to go meet with somebody and just to kind of cross information and always learn something about it. Still to this day, I saw Stuart 2 weeks ago, and I learned so much about his latest experience in Yamagata, where he makes some sake, and like learning about the rice this year and learning about different kojis that they're using. So it's a pretty fascinating part. And I think that's what lights some fire under everybody's feet about sake. It's like, and it's just with wine too, and spirits. It's like, you can't just like, oh, I learned it all. I'm a master sommelier, or I'm a master of wine or something. No, I mean, those people will say, you always have to keep learning. And that's something I learned early on from the Court of Masters that we started going through on the wine side, and then the sake side, and every other realm that we've been to. And it's pretty fascinating. So at the same time that there's innovation with sakes like Yamagata, with Takeda-san experimenting with different agings and honjosos and things like that, then you start seeing people in a huge revolving area in Japan experimenting with even pushing the bigger envelope. And I'll hit in on a point that it's pretty realistic, but it's kind of sad. In Japan, the domestic consumption has gone down severely. So, and this, it's no surprise, something that happened in Italy, France, Spain, over the years in the past decades. So imagine this, in the purpose of Europe, people drink wine all the time and produce wine, and it's amazing stuff. But all of a sudden, your kids say, oh, wine is for grandpa. It's like, that's what he drinks. I'm not gonna drink that. It's like, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna try cocktails. I'm gonna try beer. I'm gonna try something else, right? So domestic consumption starts going down. It's not that cool anymore. So how do you keep that synergy going? So as a reference, in Japan in the 80s, 1985 or so, there was about 3,000 breweries and in existence and producing. These days, it's way under 2,000 breweries. So it's like a dramatic decrease. And in Japan proper, like there's a number of people that keep drinking sake, mostly regional, but most of it relies on the export. So you're talking about the US leading the charts, the UK, France, it's growing. Australia is a huge part of the consumption of sake and like keeping it alive and refreshing. So it's pretty exciting. With that being said, there's a couple producers that are changing things around. I mean, you talk about Izumi Bashu in Kanagawa, kind of bringing back some styles with richness, with tying up like the ancient methods to the new. Also, I came across, there's this event called Niigata Sake no Jin. And this event, I've been hearing about it since the first time I went to Niigata, back to see Kenji at Ishishima. And he told me about it, and I couldn't quite comprehend what it was. But it's basically the largest sake tasting in the world that I can name of. 140,000 people in a 2-day period in a modern-sized, decent-sized convention center. Nothing that I ever expected in my wildest dreams. So imagine walking in, and there's like at least 50 to 60,000 people at any given time, like schools of fish just going through these booths. And Niigata is known for a high density of production of sake because of its water and techniques. So there's about 90 producers in Niigata, and 89 of them participate in this event that covers Niigata and Sado Island, which sits right next door. So you walk in, and there's all these booths, and the producers pour their sake and also sell it. So you could go there, try something, and buy a bottle and take it, right? So you walk in, and I'm super excited. I was not planning on going, but my friend Kazu really called me like last minute. He said, no, you're going. I'm picking you up in Tokyo, and I'm gonna bring you here so you can see what this is all about. And tell all your friends. So I go there, I land in Tokyo, he picks me up, he drives like a maniac through the mountains in winter, in March, and get there. The next day at 8 in the morning, we go and wait in line, and there's like thousands of people waiting already. I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. It's like, I've been to some events, like soccer games, things like that, but nothing like this exciting. And people are like, they're like drinking energy drinks, or like, in Japan, it's huge to drink vitamins. So like, vitamin C or vitamin B12 and all these things, and hydrating. I was like, wow, they're pre-gaming. This is like a true tailgate. It's like, it's the opposite. So they walk in, people rush in, but in very Japanese fashion. It's like schools of fish, like very oriented and organized. And so you start going through the booths, and the big mistake that I made is I didn't do enough research, and my friend Kazu was so happy that I went that he was telling everybody that we stopped at, he says, this is Eduardo, he's from Mexico, he came from California, he works with sake, and people were so excited. I was like, oh my God. So they give you a little choco, a little sake glass when you come in, and they would over pour. And instead of the average person would be like a little quarter of it, right? And you taste, and it's like, okay, cool. But for me, they were so excited. They're like, oh my God, this guy made it. He's not Japanese, he doesn't live around the corner. And they would be so excited, and they pour you all this much, and you drink it, and I start looking, there's no spit cups, no spittoons, nothing. And I was like, okay. And then as soon as you're tasting it, they get the second bottle, and they're like, and this is our other one. And so you start tasting, not even an hour into it. I mean, we're talking by the time the doors open, like 9:45 in the morning. I was like feeling it. And I'm a lightweight. I taste a lot. I spit a lot. I can't hang. So don't dare me. But anyway, we start tasting, and I finally tell Kazu, this is not going to work out, buddy. This goes till 6 p.m. or 5, and I'm already there. So I go, and I said, excuse me, I'll be back. And I go to the bathroom, and right next to the bathroom, there's a vending machine, and I finally find this like coffee that's in a metal can. So I walk in, and I buy it real quick. And I go to the bathroom, empty it, drink half of it because I needed to come back. And I rinse it a couple times, and I go back in there, and I conveniently fits in my pocket. Okay, now I can do this. And every once in a while, I'll go and empty my cup. So we start seeing different producers. So tying back to the younger generations, kind of getting excited, there's this one producer, Takachio. And I look up to this corner, and it's like a super kind of cool-looking hipster dude. And it's like, there's a crowd of like 20 to 30-year-olds around his booth at all times. Like, we were there for a couple hours, and I keep noticing this, like, wow, what's going on there? And I asked my friend Kazu, who's like a little older, and I said, Kazu, what's up with that? He's like, oh, don't worry, it's like the young people like that. And I'm like, yeah, what is it? It's like, okay, let's go talk to him, I know him. So we go in there, and this guy has a vest and a ponytail and a goatee, and he's like super cool dude, and they're experimenting with different styles. So basically they do like different chapters, they call, and it's like different rice strains, everything else on the production is the same, but all these kids are eating it up. So I get kind of excited. I talked to Cass about it. I said, like, is this in the US? Like, nope, it's not in the US yet, but eventually will be, blah, blah, blah. So I said, you got to make sure somebody brings this, because this will be a huge hit in the US. He says, no, they only make very little, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, there's 2 or 3 producers that really rocked my world in that event. I go back to Tokyo. I still had 1 or 2 nights after that Niigata trip. And I start going out to the bars that people recommended and stumble across. And I start asking about these producers. And they're like, one place was literally, they said, no, it's just for locals. We only have this little. We're not going to share with a foreigner. So it took me a lot of talking and blah, blah, blah. They understood that I knew this much about sake. So they actually let me taste some and stuff. But it was like producers like that kind of start lighting the fire under it and creating a synergy with the younger generations. That's quite exciting. Now, speaking of that, being that said, this third producer, thank you. Wow, I had a lot to catch up here. This third producer is a producer from Fukui Prefecture. And Fukui Prefecture kind of sits southern central Japan, and it's known for like rich mineral water. And something that a few producers in that region are doing, and they're figuring out, is like, there's a lot to kind of hold on to from our past. Artisanal styles, richer, more developed, complex. I don't know if you guys can smell this, but wow, it smells like, I don't know, marzipan, nutty. There's like a little caramel. In a very pleasant way. Imagine you're in Hawaii and you forgot your swimsuit in the trunk for a couple days after being in the beach. So, but in a very pleasant way. Like, it brings you a great memory of it, all right? So it's not in a bad connotation. But this is a style that they have really figured out. This brewery started in 1751. Very young Toji, or brewmaster that's holding the reins right now, wanted to really maintain this style and keep the ties to the past. So a really ancient style. This is, and for anybody that likes sherry, likes Madeira, a little bit of like Amontillados, things like that, it's really beautiful. And there's nothing better than sitting down to, I don't know how fancy you guys are at home, but I'm not. But I could only imagine myself with a burger with a little seared foie gras on top and a little caramelized onions. I could only imagine. And a bottle of this one, and just lock the door and don't let anybody in, because I'm gonna have a great time. So kind of things like that. This is definitely your experiential sake that's gonna bring it up a level. You can do carne asada if you like Mexican food and put a little bit of salsa in there and just call it a day, or bistecca fiorentina. This will break through with the richness, the fatty layers and meatiness of the sake. So a really beautiful style. And one thing I really enjoy about these 3 guys is like definitely you have some sort of like vision towards the future with the katafune. You have somebody that's been innovating and creating a clean, friendly style. So if I had some friends coming over to the house and they've never had sake before, this would probably be the first one I would introduce them to. It's like, okay, we are here. You're gonna kind of go up and down in terms of style, or richness, acidity, sugar, sweetness, all these things. And then this will be like the ultimate level. This is like, okay, you're there, put your seatbelts, because we're gonna go real fast. So this will kind of bring in a lot of things. And very exciting, the amino acids, the richness, the marzipan. I mean, you could do desserts, you can just do it on its own. I don't know how many of you guys had a style like this of sake before? No, so pretty first time. And it's definitely a style that's creating a renaissance. There's a number of brewers in Japan that are kind of bringing this up. There's a countless number of producers. I'll be happy to talk about you on a different time. But wow, it's just really unique, certainly. And there's definitely endless stories about sake and the production, the people, things to look forward in Japan when you go into a place. There's places that are really pushing the envelope as far as cuisine and sake. So I would like to think, and I've been really investigating this one through, in the US, we're sort of, even though it took us longer to kind of get behind sake, first hot sake, then sake bombs. No thanks. Hopefully not too often. But that's one way to defer from sake. And then getting it into more serious establishments and having it at places like French Laundry, Le Bernardin in New York. I mean, high-end, Michelin-starred, serious places that are non-Japanese, and being like, wow, sake really takes the center main stage into these places. It is something to be taken serious because of the span and styles that are available out there. And it's pretty unique how it's gone this far. And then in Japan, in a lot of ways, still be seen as it's something you drink every once in a while, celebratory at places, but just slowly, in my own experience, has taken the bigger stage. So recently, I was at a place called Gem by Moto in Ebizu. If you ever go to Tokyo, it's like really close to Shibuya. And it's one young chef, her name is Marie, and she's like really changing the way things like sake changes around. It's a tiny spot, and she does a lot of things like fondue and a lot of textural creamy cheese and things like that with sake. And that's one place, if you end up there, you're really gonna get like your like carpet, the rug swept off your feet, because you're like, wow, how'd you do that? It's like, there's this like cheese grapefruit, like shaved black truffle on top, and you're pairing it with this one sake that I would never think about, but it makes a lot of sense. In my own experience, when I started doing all the events, I started series of pairings. So we did first an Italian and sake pairing with the CIA, with the Culinary Institute of America at Copia. They had an amazing chef, Chef Pauly, who had one of my all-time favorite Italian chefs. So we have a time, and we planned an event with her, and she says, I'm really nervous about this. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to incorporate Japanese ingredients. And I said, no, wait right there. Let's just keep it really straightforward, just Italian ingredients, your favorites, like grandma's recipes. So one of my all-time favorites, we had like 35 people or something show up, like anywhere from master somms to winemakers and people that just came over. And one of my all-time favorite dishes was this cacio pepe pasta. So it's like grandma's like house-made pasta with black pepper, pecorino, spicy, pungent, rich. And it was with a koshu sake. And koshu sake, it's actually an aged sake, very similar to a style like this, with a little more even richness and coloration. By law, has to be aged 3 years. And it develops a real experience. So when you have a dish like that is even hard to pair with wine, like really aggressive, like grandma was mad that day. She put a lot of black pepper in there, the cheese, and it was like pairing it with this sake that really stood up to it. It was like this, I don't know, like a big sumo wrestler just kind of hugging the pasta, and it was amazing. So one of the most favorite dishes. We've experimented with barbecue and sake. We've done a taco and sake night that was pretty fun. We brought these guys that own a taco truck, really good friends of mine, and we brought about 5 different sakes. We paired them with their 5 tacos they had that night, and it was just like an eye-opening experience. And we try to replicate that more than anything to have a lot of fun and just to get people out of their comfort zone. Because sake, sadly, still to this day, even though it's really gained a lot of legs and wings throughout the US, you see it at markets, you see it at more places, ideally sushi places. But the cool thing is seeing it like places like Cosme, New York, Chef Enrique Olvera's place. I walked in there a couple years ago, and I did not expect, sake is the last thing I expected to see, and I opened the list. They have 4 sakes by the glass. I was like, what the hell? So I called my friend who actually represents those sakes, and I said, well, how'd you do that? What happened? And she said, no, Chef Enrique Olvera reached out to me and said, my food goes with sake perfectly from experience, so I want to have a few sakes. And when we were there for dinner, we tried all 4 with different dishes, and it was like a true match made in heaven. So little things like that kind of like tie it all in and make it very, very amazing. So it's something I'd really invite everybody to kind of get comfortable, bring a bottle of sake home, and like get some smoked ribs. I mean, you name it. Just go really far, 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 and try it out and raise a glass for all those producers that are doing amazing things for generations. I mean, you're talking about the oldest brewery on record, still open with family. 1141 was established, and it's still going 50-something generations. The average brewery, I want to say, is 10, 12 generations, and they're really carrying this craftsmanship, an amazing thing that's actually extend to other parts of the world. The US, here we have 21 breweries brewing sake, corner to corner of the US, from Brooklyn all the way to Oakland. I was at their Oakland brewery, it's called Den Sake, last week, and it was incredible. It's like a little smaller than this theater. That's the whole thing. A lot of passion, a lot of love. So with that being said, I want to say thank you to all of you guys. Raise a glass for all the sake producers making all this artisanal, amazing beverages. So cheers to all of you. Cheers. Kanpai.